What's up, Anchor Peeps? Anchorpete here, and I'm with my beautiful wife, Shari T.
Hello.
You know we love Stephen King. We talked about him in The Stand. We've been reviewing episodes of The Stand with Danny and Athena. And now we're going to talk about one of his short stories that was originally published in 1980, right?
Oh, is it that old?
Oh, yeah.
I read it in the Nightmares and Dreamscapes book, which came out in the 90s, I believe.
1993.
Okay.
So this collection in 1980, do you know what it was? It was actually a Cthulhu collection. That
Of
Stephen
course
King
it was. That makes sense.
was a contributor to.
Yeah, considering the topic that Crouch End covers.
Stephen King has actually credited HP Lovecraft as his main influence in his life. So like he's said before that he wouldn't be the writer that he is today if there was no HP Lovecraft.
Ah.
You can clearly see the Lovecraft influence just like oozing its tentacles all over it.
They even mention Lovecraft in the story.
Yeah. And elder gods are referenced throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the story a little bit without any spoilers. Then we're going to jump into spoilers. The short story itself is available to listen to on YouTube. And I highly recommend listening to it because you know what? It's narrated by the great Tim Curry himself.
Who is associated with Stephen King by playing Pennywise in the original miniseries.
Yes, right. He's in that. Yes.
And he's fabulous in it.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't read Nightmares and Dreamscapes for a really long time. I think I actually got the book when it came out. So what'd you say, 93?
It came out in 93, yes.
Yeah, so I haven't read it since then. But that story in the book, of all the short stories in that book, really stuck with me. I thought it was really frightening. I couldn't have told you what happens all in the plot, but I remember specifically the tunnel scene scared the bejesus out of me. So I just knew that when we started talking about short stories, I would love to revisit that one. And
throughout this video, I'm going to have footage from the adaptation of the story. You said that you read Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Well, TNT, in 2006, they adapted Nightmares and Dreamscapes into a miniseries. There's 8 parts, and Crouch End is one of those parts. The setup of the story itself is very much like a Lovecraftian tale too, because the main characters aren't experiencing the horror firsthand, right?
Right, they're hearing about it from a couple.
Yeah, and the main characters in this story are these 2 cops that are in London. First cop is this alcoholic veteran member of the police force. His name is Ted Vedder. And then the other cop, he's this up-and-coming cop. His name is Robert Farnham.
Right, and he's new.
Yeah, and
he's new to the town of Crouch End, and he finds out that there's more going on in this little sleepy town than he had suspected.
Yeah, yeah.
He thinks this is going to be a boring job.
I guess we would have to go into spoilers to kind of show where the story goes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Shari, can you tell us about Doris and her husband?
Doris and her husband are vacationing in London. We get a little backstory on them. He's an attorney.
Yeah.
Was that correct? And they have 2 small children at the hotel waiting for them. This is her first time out of the country, and she's very excited to be in London. And they are going to meet, I think it's like a work colleague or a potential employer. Potential employer. They've never met him, but this person lives in Crouch End, and he's invited them to dinner. So they're trying to catch a cab to get to Crouch End, which is somewhere out of the center of the city, but on the outskirts of London.
Yeah.
So I think it's creepy that no cabs will take them there.
Yeah.
All the cabbies hear that they want to go to Crouch End, and everybody's like, no way. And they think at first that it's because it's far and they don't want to go out of their way. But I think after you hear the whole story, you like realize that none of the cab drivers want to go to Crouch End because of all the creepy things that go on there. Anyway, they finally get a cab driver who is described. I was kind of curious about this as like this very gentlemanly, buttoned up, totally different from New York cab drivers kind of guy. And he agrees to take them, where he promptly abandons them when they get out of the car to check a phone book, I believe, or make a phone call.
After he leaves, what are some of the creepy things that we see?
Okay, so well, it starts with like there's a lot of stuff about really great writing about how the sunlight and the sun going down is affecting how they see things. It's all blood red and orange colors. And I know that time of day. I know that kind of sunset. And so it gave me a really good visual. But the weird thing is that this is 5 miles from the town center, and it's completely deserted. They don't see any people. They don't see any cars. The only people they see are two little ratty children.
Yeah.
Who are laughing and are mean to them, say some rude things, and they just think these are kind of, rapscallion children on the street. However, there is something notable that comes up later, that the boy has kind of a deformed claw hand, right?
Yes.
So that kind of already sets the woman, Doris, a little bit, she's uneasy because of these things. Lonnie is very happy-go-lucky. He's not that kind of guy to worry about all these little things. So he's fine. He's like, everything's fine. Let's just walk.
Yeah.
We can walk. We can make this. It's only a mile away.
Do you think that that's like the inverse of us? Do you think that, like, if we were in this kind of scenario, you'd be like, oh, come on, this isn't a big deal. And I'd be like, oh, weird cancer claws. You think
maybe. But I like trust my instincts. And I think I might definitely be creeped out if in the circumstances that are described in this story. I think I'd be nervous.
Well, what if you saw the cat?
Okay. And then, she sees this like gross cat with a chewed up face, right? And there's like a milky eye and half of its face is scratched off or something. Yeah. They start to take the walk.
Yes.
And Lonnie sees something. He hears moaning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And his first instinct is like, I better go help that person.
Someone's in trouble. Someone's in trouble. We got to help him, which is very do-gooder. Very do-gooder, and he's not suspicious at all, whereas she's kind of like, no, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
It's described that he goes through some sort of hedge.
And it like leaves his imprint as he goes through it, right?
Yeah, I had a hard time like imagining this hedge that he was going through that she couldn't see through, or she could vaguely see through.
Yeah.
But she had a hard time getting through it. So I had a hard time kind of understanding what kind of hedge we're talking about. I guess it was a pretty tall hedge.
Yeah.
Anyway,
big bush.
She gets a
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
She gets a glimpse of where the moaning's coming from. She sees like a black smoking hole in the ground of this nice green lawn.
Yeah.
And that's where the moaning's coming from. And Lonnie heads on over there.
Good old Lonnie.
Is anyone in there? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
And then she can't see anymore because this massive hedge. And Lonnie starts to scream.
Yeah, like, let's get out of here.
Okay, so after this, Lonnie, they make reference to the fact that he's kind of acting childish, and he just takes off his coat and throws it off, and she realizes that he's losing his mind a little bit. Whatever he saw, she mentioned some sort of tentacles, and there's some black stuff on his coat. He is able to get away from the creature in the lawn, and they continue on their journey, but he's not the same. He seems to be out of it. Which is very Lovecraftian, that you would lose your mind from what you saw, right?
Exactly. See, I want to reference something right there, because you see, Shari and I, the whole reason why we even know each other, our romance is thanks to HP Lovecraft. Because I was looking for friends when I first moved to Austin, Texas, and I joined this Cthulhu role-playing game, and that's where I met my wife. She was one of the players, along with her brother and his wife, right? And shout out to our friend Mitch, who's probably not watching this, but he's the one that ran it. Anyway, in that game, in the Lovecraft game that you can play, you have to roll to check your sanity. And if you go crazy, your character, like if you see something that makes you go crazy, it takes away your sanity. And if you eventually reach this low point, then you lose. Like you can't play anymore because your character has essentially gone mad. And so after Lonnie saw this image, it made him like lose his sanity. He lost that sanity roll right there.
Right. Yeah. Right. So but she's happy he's still with her. I shouldn't say happy because no one's happy at this point. She's terrified. Yeah. And again, the streets, they're still just in a public street in a neighborhood, but no one is around. They're still walking. At this point, there's a tunnel coming up ahead. And to me, this is the kind of the climax of the story, because this is where I actually felt fear listening to the story. Now, not all books and stories that are horror or scary are going to scare you. I don't know if you felt scared, but the part in the tunnel scares me.
Oh yeah. I mean, because the thing is with the elder gods themselves, right? Like with the Cthulhu Mythos that Lovecraft has created, it's never this idea of like, oh, a person is eaten and they're dead. Oh, a person is like slashed and they're dead, right? It's this idea that you are just like consumed forever. There's this thing in the darkness and you're never heard of and ever again, and just like unthinkable things happen, right? And there's this
that's what's implied. Yeah, it's like what you're saying is they never really say what happens to the people who go missing.
It's
the people who don't go missing go mad.
Exactly. It's this ambiguous thing, and it's super effective. It's effective in the story. It's effective in the Lovecraft stuff that I know of, because you have to imagine what's happening versus just hearing the horrific thing happening. And so you just picture something that goes on forever and ever, and it's this horrible fate, right? And so the particular god that they think is referenced in this story, or that might be the main antagonist in the story, is Shub-Niggurath. Okay. And the reason why it's this particular god that's referenced is because they say specifically a black goat with 1,000 young.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So
And the 1,000 young refers to her victims, I believe.
yeah. So
she's a female.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the Lovecraft myth is so interesting to me. And actually, I was hoping, if you guys are still watching at this point, could you guys, if you're big Lovecraft fans, I would love suggestions for modern takes on Lovecraft stories, like stories that are written by people that are not Lovecraft. If you leave that in the comments, oh, I would love that. Craft.
The stuff in the tunnel is very creepy. Like,
Good.
I shouldn't say she imagines. Something grabs her on the shoulder when they go into this tunnel where it's pitch black, and it's a hairy hand, and it asks her for a cigarette.
Oh, yes.
And she can smell it, and she sees the shape, but she can't exactly, and she sees two big green eyes, and she thinks it's the cat that she has seen a couple of times moving from store window to store window. And to me, that just freaked me out. Just that she would be in the tunnel with that thing. Anyway, it's really good writing. It scared me. Lonnie, when she is grabbed by the arm and has to talk to this cat, Lonnie just wanders out into the daylight and disappears, and that she never sees him again.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, part of me is like, why didn't she follow him? But I guess, like, she was detained. And something probably got him pretty quickly, and then he is never seen again.
Yeah. Well, there is where she sees there's the tentacles, right?
Okay, so she comes out of the tunnel.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the neighborhood they were in has now turned into like warehouses, which is also Lovecraftian. Last thing she sees in the middle of all these warehouses is the ground opening up and tentacles coming out, and she's terrified out of her mind. And when she comes to reality, she's just cowering in like a doorway.
Oh, there's a really fun detail though to throw in there too.
What?
On the tentacles are like the little suction cuppy things that you see on a squid, right? And then she thinks that they might be faces too.
She thinks she sees Lonnie's face.
She thinks she sees Lonnie's face.
The story goes on to talk about how the woman then is escorted to the police station by some people, because when she comes to, she's back in the town. It's a normal town. There's people walking by, and she sees a couple who's willing to escort her to the police station. However, when she starts telling the couple what has happened, they start treating her like a pariah. They're like, get away from me. You've been to the town. I thought that was interesting, because it seems like the people of Crouch End who live there have some idea that there's this other dimension and these other happenings going on in this town. And a lot of them haven't been touched by it or haven't experienced it. So when someone has, they treat them like a pariah and as if they're going to spread it. So they were like, get away from us. There's a police station. Don't come near us anymore.
Yeah.
Which is already just adding to her beyond terrible day that she's having. So that's how the story is framed, with the police hearing her story, how they feel about it. And she reports the story. Stephen King goes on to talk about what happens to her in her life, and he goes on to talk about what happens to the two police officers who heard her story and who have the differing views, where you have Vetter, who is a veteran. Which, I don't know if it's that his name is on purpose because he's a veteran, and the other guy, what's his name?
Farnham.
Farnham?
Yeah, Farnham.
Farnham. Yeah, Farnham, who doesn't really believe and thinks this is all nonsense. Farnham gets his comeuppance.
Yeah, he comes out of the precinct and he is
takes a little walk.
Wondering where his partner is. He can't find him, and then he is the one that goes missing. So we don't know what happens to Farnham. There's just like a little epilogue. He's missing. His family, he had a wife and at least one kid, maybe two kids. They don't know where their dad went. The other detective, Eddie Vedder, right? He has a heart attack a couple years later.
Right. It seems like no one who stays in Crouch End very long does very well.
Yeah.
Like they do have a sequence where they talk about how all the policemen have either they've had a heart attack or they've gone missing or someone's hair is white by the time they're 40. Well, and this also happens to Doris. She goes on to In the epilogue.
She's hospitalized after this whole situation. She tries to kill herself, which gets her hospitalized. And then when they think that she's recovered, she goes home. And like the very end of the book or the story is that she like climbs into her closet at night and writes on the wall. And she writes about the black goat with 1,000 young.
Yeah. She just kind of writes it over and over again, which I found like kind of a scary detail that she's living this normal life. However, she has this closet craziness that she has to do just to kind of hang in there.
Yeah.
So she recovers, but only sort of.
Yeah. So, as a typical Lovecraft story, even a Lovecraft story written by Stephen King, it has, pretty negative ending, pretty hopeless ending. It's definitely that feeling. King is able to give you that feeling of, there are things that are far greater, far more powerful than we are, and we are like nothing to them. And we should be so lucky as to never come in contact.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Shari, I actually enjoyed listening to this story, probably because Tim Curry read it and he had all these different voices, and I just love listening to his own voice.
Yeah, too. He was fantastic.
Yeah. We are going to be covering short stories, like I said, for the rest of February, and because it's us, they're probably going to have like a horror slant, right? And one thing, just to kind of give you a heads up, we're going to be drawing from this Nightfire Press publication or whatever. They have their short stories where you can just listen to them online. They have their own channel on Audible, right? So we have a couple of short stories coming up from there, and I think we have at least one more Stephen King that we're going to do too.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a certain short story you think we should review, we would love to hear suggestions.
Hell yeah, bring it on. All right, until then, we'll see you guys real soon.
Bye.